Welcome to Biopractice webinar on FDA medical device regulation, overview of labeling requirements. The presenter for today's webinar is Sheila Ramaman, RSC, SJR Associates. During the presentation, for any kind of questions, kindly post your questions in the chat box of your GoToMeeting tool, and the speaker would address those questions during the Q&A session. And now, I would like to hand over to the presenter, Sheila Ramaman. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you, attendees, for being here today, for taking time out of your Friday to learn a little bit about the medical device labeling requirements, and we'll get right into it. As the moderator said, you should have a copy of the presentation. If you don't, please email Biopractice and they will send you one. Okay, there we go. So our topics for today will cover what the regulations for device labeling are. We'll go through some terms and definitions along with the regulatory citations, so you'll know where to find them in the future. We'll talk a little bit about unique device identifiers, a standardized date format, and the Good ID database. We'll also talk about product claims, promotional claims, and off-label use as they relate to device labeling. So the FDA labeling requirements are our first topic. The main regulations are found at 21 CFR Part 801. Are divided into subparts for those of you that are unfamiliar with how the CFR are divided up. The general provisions for medical device labeling are in subpart A. Over-the-counter product labeling is found in subpart C. Exemptions are in subparts D and E, so there, as with any regulation, there are devices or instances where there are exemptions to the regulations stated otherwise, and then there are special requirements for specific devices, which are in subpart H. The general provisions are the ones that you will probably use the most unless you have a device to which specific labeling requirements apply. So 21 CFR Part 801 is where you're going to find the definitions, what FDA means when they talk about intended use, about adequate directions for use. This is where you'll find the regulations about misleading statements. There are certain statements that are required on the label that must be more prominent than other information. So those are called the prominence requirements. There are regulations for Spanish language versions of labeling. This is where you'll find the new regulations for the standardized date format, as well as the name and place of business requirements on the device label. There are quality system requirements for control of labeling activities at 21 CFR 820.120. There are specific labeling regulations for IVDs, or laboratory tests and instruments, at CFR 809.10. It's broken up into requirements for reagents, which would also be for test kits, for instruments, for general purpose laboratory reagents or equipment, for analyte-specific reagents, over-the-counter sample collection system for drugs of abuse testing, and as always, there are exceptions, in this case for lab tests that are held in the strategic national stockpile. So if you manufacture an IVD, these are the regulations that you need to follow in terms of your instructions for use, basically, but also your product labels and other labeling, in addition to the general labeling requirements found at 801. There are labeling requirements for investigational devices at Part 812. In that, they are exempt from many of the labeling requirements because it is an investigational device. It's not being put into commercial distribution. It must bear the caution statement for investigational use only to show that it is an investigational device and not a commercial device. If you have an electronic product, something that emits radiation, like an X-ray device, ultrasound, lasers, those kinds of things, there are specific labeling requirements, safety label wording and symbols that must be used, found at 21 CFR Part 1010. So some definitions. The word label is defined in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act at Section 201K here as cited, and it is defined as a display of written, printed, or graphic matter upon the immediate container of any article. So what goes on the vial, the device, itself is the label.